I'm sort of horrified at the idea that church leaders, somebody is struggling, and now that, like you say, they add guilt and shame to all the stuff that they're working with. And, Jesus' invitation is, come to me and I'll give you rest. That's the invitation. And I think pastors as under-shepherds are meant to help people with their burdens, not to add to the burden.
Well, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to this panel. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy lives to come and join me. I think today's discussion is going to be absolutely fascinating. As you know, we're talking about personal faith and mental health. And, the Bible gives us wonderful promises. For example, Jesus said, I come to give you abundant life, life to overflowing. 2 Corinthians 5 tells us that we are new creations when we say yes to Jesus. So the first question I want to put to you all is this: should Christians not be immune to mental health disorders with all the promises of the Bible? And I wonder, maybe I could start with you, Peter, as the Bible expert in our midst.
Well, the truth is, there are those great promises, but life hits us all. And there's a number of examples. You've got David, who, when he's taken into the household of Saul, he grows, he matures, he leads 1,000 men. Life is fantastic. He's married the king's daughter. The trajectory looks amazing. And then all of a sudden, there is a song that is being sung in the city of Jerusalem that promotes David more than Saul. Saul has slain his thousands, David his tens of thousands. And everything starts to go wrong in his life from then on. So that he eventually, having been tried to be killed twice by King Saul, he goes on the run. So he loses his job, he loses his income, he loses his home where he's staying. He's got 3,000 bounty hunters who are commissioned to find him and kill him. He ends up living in caves. In fact, he goes into the territory of the enemy, and they say, well, they sang about this guy. What's he doing here? It's the territory of the Philistines where he defeated Goliath. And he's so paranoid in that moment, he begins to act like a madman. He lets saliva run down his beard, he climbs the gate, and they say, get away with this man. So we see David there, who's called the sweet psalmist of Israel, the man after God's heart, the one who wrote so many of the Psalms, who led Israel as the greatest king. But a period in his life where he literally thought, this is it. The only way for me to get out of here is to be mad. And he goes and lives in a cave. And the only people who are attracted to him are people in debt, in distress, and discontented. And so you get a firm example there, but then you get Joseph sold into slavery. You get Jesus, who in John 12 says, now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, deliver me for this hour. And so Jesus gets to the point where he's tempted to want to give up, and he feels it in his soul. And so we do have promises, but those promises don't make you immune from life's troubles. Those promises are there to carry you through those troubles.
Great. I love that. I love that. So how do we carry ourselves through these difficult times, challenges of life?
I think if anything, those promises are reminders that, when those moments come, we have to sort of remind ourselves of those promises, because they're there. If we were immune to them in the first place, we wouldn't even need the promises. What's the point of saying all is going to be well with your soul if it was well and there was no signs of anything else not being well? So you wouldn't need that guarantee of that promise that all is well and we're blessed in the city, we're blessed in the field, if sometimes it wouldn't look like you're blessed in the city and sometimes it wouldn't look like you're blessed in the field. And so I think those promises, and they're repeated so often just so we can remind ourselves and read God's word and go, oh yeah, this is the truth. When my life might not look like it, when what I'm going through might not look like it, I know that there is something I can hope for, that it's different. And I think that's a lot of the thing, that when it comes to mental health and when it comes to our own sort of circumstances we're dealing with, we lose hope, we lose the feeling that things will get better and could get better.
Yeah, that even happened to the Apostle Paul, didn't it? In 2 Corinthians, he says, we despaired even of life. He got to that point where he thought, this is it, it's the end. And then he talks about how Titus came and encouraged us and refreshed our spirits and turned things around. And so, out of that, he speaks about we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God. And he says the ultimate goal was that we would learn not to rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. And so faith for me becomes a vital part of navigating life and navigating difficulty. And we can take encouragement that people like Elijah, who called down fire from heaven, got depressed and ran away and hid in a cave and said, God, take me home. I'm no better than anyone else.
Yes.
And he came through that. And interestingly, the way he came through it was he had angel cake. It all began with God feeding him.
Yes.
And he goes in the strength of that for 40 days. And then God doesn't appear in a mighty way in the thunder and the earthquake and all, but the still small voice. And so God, I think, engages with us, and our faith is meant to engage with God in a way that meets us where we are in the journey and in the trial of life.
That's so good. So really what I'm hearing you say is that our faith is there to engage with God, to help us through challenging times. And we see throughout the Bible that just about every person in the Bible went through challenging times. But I want to draw you in here at this point. Dr. Shari, you're a medical doctor, have been one for many, many years. But you were at the front line, particularly the last couple of years when COVID hit, the pandemic brought all sorts of challenges, especially to our doctors, nurses, and medical staff. How did you carry yourself through these difficult times? And how did you engage your faith to help you through your own challenging times?
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that we're still human. We, even though we're Christians, we still go through the normal storms of life. I mean, in general practice, I think the current figure is 30% of general practice work is mental health related. So that's a massive number. So, and nearly all of us, I think, will go through some kind of mental health challenge in our lives, whether it's through bereavement, loss, through stage of life. So I think it'd be very unusual for someone not to have a mental health issue at some point in their life. So we should kind of normalize it. And I think we have got better at talking about it. I think in one of our previous discussions, we talked about young people talking about it a lot more. So I find that young people often are a lot more open about talking about mental health now. They're used to it. They talk about it at school and stuff. But sometimes older people find it a bit more tricky. I mean, personally, yes, the pandemic was particularly hard. Obviously, we weren't seeing patients face to face so much. We were doing it through other methods, which had its own challenges. And personally speaking, there were times when it was very tough, and also sometimes not working so closely in a team with other clinicians. But personally speaking, I also have had mental health issues in terms of burnout. This is actually before the pandemic, but it was just to do with the particular place where I was working and the workload at that time. And, I had to come to a point where I admitted I was struggling with coping with the work, and it was starting to affect me emotionally and stuff. So I remember doing a bit of medical training on burnout and just thinking, gosh, I'm ticking nearly every box that was in this seminar, and I was actually taken aback by it. And I had to admit myself, actually, yes, I think this is what I'm suffering with. And that was quite a big thing to let myself believe, because, normally as a doctor, pastor, you're used to always helping other people. But I think we've got to get to the place where there isn't any shame in asking for help and just admit we're human, and there's something really powerful. That's the beauty of the church, is we have other people we can go to and ask for help. And it was something I had to work through, but just in a way, admitting your vulnerabilities and your frailty actually also helps you to identify with other people so much more when you've got your own testimony to share and when you've been through that yourself.
So in your particular case, did your faith in Jesus help you? Was it a primary thing that helped you, or were there other things that helped you more in that particular time?
I think it was a mix of things. I did go and see my own GP. So I think it's really important as Christians to seek that help, speak to your GP. That's what they're there for. But equally also speaking to people in the church, So it's good to have that twin way of dealing with things. But actually my GP was really helpful. I was signed off for a time, and that just helped me to regroup and just refresh myself, refresh my energy. And so, yeah, I would say absolutely use all the resources that we have. I mean, if we have a physical issue, most people don't have an issue with going to their doctor and talking about it and receiving medical help. So I think in the same way, we need to start realizing, if we haven't already, that emotional issues, mental health issues can be helped a lot by speaking to your doctor.
Yes. So Shari, one of the things you said was you went to the church for help. I assume you went and spoke to a pastor, got some prayer. Well, one of the things I've heard over these years, being a pastor myself for a good few years, and I've heard people tell me this, is that some of them either think this or they've been told this by a particular pastor in their church, that the reason why they've got anxiety or depression is because they've got some sin, or that they don't have enough faith, and so putting all the onus, the blame back on them, on that person. And I'm assuming making them feel very guilty and ashamed. Do you have any thoughts, anything to say about that? Maybe Manny, could you start off with just giving your insight into that?
Yeah. I think what a burden to carry on an individual, right? That, everything that you're facing is because of decisions and things that, you've made and you're proactive in that mind frame. But I think, referencing and literally looking at the Bible, God's and Jesus saying to us that, his yoke is easy. And I think when we think about just the fact that God has paid the price. Jesus has paid the price for every single thing. He's bared single thing on him. So when we think about decisions we make, even if we feel like we've made decisions that have put us in, circumstances that we shouldn't be in, God has paid the price for that. Jesus has paid the price. He bears it all on himself. So when those circumstances come and when those situations come, we can know that there is nothing. I don't need to pay the price or weigh this burden on myself. But yeah, I think in that relationship, you always have to think God has placed us here for this reason. He's placed us here for a purpose, and it's not to be condemned. It's not to be. It's not to carry out our sins ourselves. It's not that we have made these decisions consciously, but it's that he's got a plan for us. He loves us. And yeah, I think there's a lot deeper stuff that goes on with that you can probably expand on.
Yeah, I'm sort of horrified at the idea that church leaders, somebody is struggling, and now that, like you say, they add guilt and shame to all the stuff that they're working with. And, Jesus' invitation is, come to me and I'll give you rest. That's the invitation. And I think pastors as under-shepherds are meant to help people with their burdens, not to add to the burden. And it's very easy to point the finger and say, well, there's an issue with you. That's what Job's comforters did. And Job sarcastically says, you are the wise one and wisdom will die with you. And God is the one who rebukes them all and says, you've not spoken rightly by me. You have not counseled according to my wisdom. And so I think we need to be very careful about that kind of thing. The disciples wanted to, a man was born blind, and the disciples came to Jesus and they wanted to know, where do we put the blame? Was it this man or was it his parents who sinned? Who do we point the finger at? And Jesus said, neither. But this man, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. And Jesus healed the man. And at no point do we see Jesus pointing the finger at people. We see him lifting burdens, healing people, speaking life to people. In fact, the only people he ever rebuked were his disciples, who were in the training program with Jesus. And then, they couldn't cast out a demon. Jesus said, well, bring him to me. And he didn't say, well, the problem's with the guys. He said, no, the problem's with you guys. And so I think as church leaders, we need to be very circumspect about pointing fingers at people. And we need to listen to their story. We need to hear what is it they're really going through. And there's just so many examples in Scripture where people go through stressful times. And how did they cope? How did they handle it? You know, Jesus surrounded himself with people. He says, "You are those who've travailed with me in my trials. You've been with me." So even Jesus loved that companionship. When he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, he took friends with him, even though they fell asleep and let him down. But I mean, his heart was, I need people with me in this journey.
Oh, I love that. I love the whole idea of just taking guilt off people, reminding them what Jesus' very words were, and even how he reached out and needed people alongside him.
Yeah.
And just on that note of getting outside help when you're going through anxiety, depression, I just want to ask your thoughts on the whole idea of having external help, such as medication, such as counseling. Like, how does that work with faith? Let me just read you something that Rick Warren, many of you know Pastor Rick Warren, and he had this to say. He says, "If my heart doesn't work right, I take a pill for it, and there's no shame in that. If my spleen doesn't work right and I have diabetes, I take a pill for that. There's no shame in that. If my brain doesn't work right and I have mental illness and I take a pill for that, why should I be ashamed of that? We need to remove the stigma of mental illness. It's not a sin to be sick, and the church should be saying that more than anybody else. We have stigmatized mental health for far too long, but the truth is your brain is just another organ. It's not a sin to be sick." So what are your thoughts about medication, counseling, adjunctive therapies alongside strengthening our faith, leaning in on Jesus?
Yeah.
Well, 100% I'm obviously for any medical intervention that would help. I mean, I'd say generally our training as doctors is we don't jump to medication as a first thing. So again, if someone is coming to me and saying they're feeling depressed or anxious, then you want to know why, what circumstance. You want to take a bit of a history. And then usually you would offer, well, actually, it's interesting what Peter said about listening, because I think actually listening is so important. And that's something that as doctors is part of, they talk about the doctor as drug, in that the power of listening, of a doctor being able to listen to you, is actually so powerful, sometimes more powerful than giving medication. But obviously other people can do that listening for you as well. But sometimes it'll be the first time someone has actually articulated how they're feeling to someone, you know, because it's someone objective, or they may not want to talk to their family about it. And sometimes just giving them that extra time to listen to them is so powerful. So I would say, you know, first of all, you find out the problem, you listen. But yeah, there's loads of other help out there. There's lots of stuff online. The NHS has some great websites. Psychological therapies you can access directly now. You know, if you just look up your local area and look up psychological therapies, most of those you can self-refer to. And there's some excellent stuff, and they're either online, on the phone, or face-to-face. So, and that's just, in a way, it's a fancy name for listening in a bigger context and with the same person over a longer period of time.
Yes.
But it's been proven that having people listen to you for a certain length of time and supporting you is so powerful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I just wanted to ask Manny, because you have this platform, opportunities for young people, particularly to be able to voice what they're going through. Has this been your experience, that they want someone to listen to them, to hear what they're going through?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, the platform, Turn Up Broadcasting, essentially, we exist to give young people from marginalized backgrounds, young people that may face barriers to, experiencing opportunities in the creative industries, opportunities to do so. And a lot of the times when you give young people a platform to express themselves, you can't go, oh, only within these certain parameters and certain things. And so when we go, oh, here's a young person that we've, or here's a group of young people we've given opportunities to write a song with a relevant singer-songwriter, and we bring them in, and then the young people start writing songs about things they haven't spoken about to parents, to friends, to people in their worlds, and all of a sudden they start getting emotional and start crying and need to walk out of the session because in that environment they've felt like they could express things they haven't been able to vocally express. And in those moments we've seen, like, in a way, to use that word, but breakthrough in a way that you wouldn't see in a classroom or in a, you know, that sort of setting. And it feels so comforting to know that through, you know, the creative arts, through those mediums, that young people actually are willing to express themselves. But sometimes it might not be through the mediums that we want to use and through the fashions and the ways that we want to use, but actually going to meet that young person where they're at and saying, this is a tool that you feel comfortable using. This is a method of expression that you feel comfortable using. Why don't we use that to help you explore how you really feel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Well, I'm largely in agreement with Rick Warren and what he's saying. I think the thing I would add to it is the danger is that there's a resignation to your condition. And the body naturally has self-healing properties. So, you know, you cut yourself and immediately the body goes into action to heal. And I think we have to have an attitude, both in the church and an encouragement of people, look, this is the medication you're on for now, but you need to review this and you need to strengthen your faith and build resilience. And that could be a process, that could take time, but perhaps this needs to be reviewed. Now, whether that's 6 months, 12 months, whatever. But I think from time to time, you need to review, if you're on medication, is this a permanent thing? Is this how I am now? Or can my faith actually help bring healing? And, you know, one of the things I've seen over many years is that people with incredible conditions, mental conditions, emotional conditions, psychological conditions, have found healing and have found freedom from medication. So I think it's a great intervention. I think it helps people transition through the difficulty they're going through. My fear would be, as a pastor and as a person of faith, is that there's a resignation to this. And I don't think there should ever be resignation. I think there, you know, without putting pressure on yourself, there should just be what I would call a determination to go on a journey and be in a process and let others be part of that and let there be a sort of a united wisdom, if you like, on how that process should look and to believe for healing.
Could I ask you, just quickly, we're nearly coming to the end, but have you had an experience of young pastors that you've mentored, of them having counseling, professional counseling, to help them on that journey away from resignation and embracing?
Yes, I have. And when I tell pastors that I went through 18 months of therapy, it sort of removes the stigma of you know, them needing help. And, you know, we can have a bit of a savior complex as church leaders where we think it's all down to us.
Yes.
And you need teams, you need collaboration with others who bring a different set of skills. And so I encourage pastors, you know, don't aim to try and do everything. Just be very focused on what it is you're meant to do in this season. And so we go through a process of talking, and I coach them through that. I ask a series of questions, and we get to a place, okay, this is what the focus is. And I think younger leaders tend to go off in different directions. They go where the enthusiasm is, they go where the energy is, rather than sometimes just staying with something until you really see sustained development and breakthrough, and then you go on to the next thing.
Wonderful. Fascinating. Any final thoughts from Mani or Shari?
So, I think it's good to just have that ability, permission, if you like, to know if you're struggling, and if you are, you know, seek wise counsel. Obviously, it's important to know who you're asking, and let's have a culture where we can ask for help when we need it.
Great. Well, we actually sadly have to draw it to a close today, but I want to thank you all so much for joining me on this panel and for a fascinating discussion.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good.
So that is all that we have time for today, but here are some wonderful fit-for-purpose takeaway points for you. Number one, our faith is there for us to engage with God, to aid us through any challenging times. Secondly, it's important to remember that even though we are Christians, we are still human. Thirdly, it's important to have a good way of dealing with things. So a twin way of seeking medical advice as well as speaking to people in your church, like a pastor, getting prayer, getting wisdom. Number 4, pastors are under shepherds. They're here to help and support you, not to add to your burden. So if you are not getting that help from your pastor, maybe write into TBN and we can help you to find someone who can help you. And fifthly, don't add pressure to yourself. Choose to review your progress when you're on medication. And don't be afraid to seek psychological therapies as well.